We're celebrating our 300th episode of Paper Napkin Wisdom with a special bonus. Go to papernapkinwisdom.com, scroll to the contact form at the bottom, and type the word book. We will send you 3 free ebooks: the Demand Blueprint, the Profit Blueprint for Mastering Cash Flow, and the Paper Napkin Wisdom Gratitude Ritual. That's a $25 value, all yours free. Just sign up at papernapkinwisdom.com.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hey everyone, it's Govind Jayaraman, and welcome back to Edge of the Napkin. You know, every week we take something small enough to fit on a napkin, but big enough to change how you lead, how we live, and how we think. Today's napkin is simple, but maybe too simple at first glance. So bear with me. It's a straight line right across the middle. And on the top of the line, there's a flexibility of a response and a resilient outcome. Below the line, there's a rigid response with a fragile outcome. And that line in between, the space between, that's life, that's leadership, and that's risk. So let's start where everyone probably can relate, because we're living in a world that feels like there's risk everywhere. And it's true. Prices are uncertain. Interest rates swing. Inflation is all over the place. Politics feels unstable. Climate is changing. Technology is rewriting the rules faster than we can understand them. And everyone's perception about all of those things is all over the map. If you're alive right now, you're living in a constant test of adaptability. Just think about the last few years. Lockdowns, inflation spikes, supply chain chaos, AI upending the way we work and where we work. Every plan we made came with an asterisk, subject to change at any moment. We all saw it. Some people doubled down, clenched up, tried to hold tighter to control, and they broke. Others bent, adjusted, and learned new ways to move, and they grew. That's the line on the napkin. Those who were above the line responded with flexibility, bounce. They recovered faster. Those below the line who respond with rigidity to change broke under the pressure. So the first idea here is this: the ultimate hedge against all uncertainty is flexibility. Let's pause and think about what the word hedge means, though. In finance, hedge is protection. It's a bet that you make so that if things go wrong, you don't lose everything. It's insurance against the unknown. If you think oil prices might rise, you hedge. If you think currencies might fall, you hedge against the other way. If you think markets may crash, you hedge again. But here's the thing: hedging costs money. Every time you hedge, what you buy is a trade-off, a little bit of a return for a little bit of safety. Now, let's translate that into life and leadership. What's your hedge against uncertainty? It's not a financial instrument, it's a behavioral one. It's behavioral flexibility. It's the ability to say, if the whole world changes, I can change too. It's the only hedge that doesn't expire. It doesn't decay, and it doesn't depend on someone else's system. Flexibility is a hedge that compounds. The more you use it, the more valuable it gets. So let's take this out of theory and into life. We've all experienced moments where rigidity costs us. You've seen the friend who planned the perfect vacation, everything all tied up with a bow, every hour scheduled, and then the flight got canceled. And they lost their mind, right? Because the plan broke, so they broke. Then you've seen the other person. They shrug, they smile, they grab a coffee or a tasty beverage at the bar, and they say, well, Let's see what happens because my vacation's already started. They find a new adventure, a better story, a better trip, a reframe. Or think of parenting. Every parent has that moment where they said, this is how bedtime will go, especially when the kids are little. And the kid says, no, it won't. Rigidity there, you lose. Flexibility, you find connection and maybe even laughter. It's the same in relationships, business, politics, everywhere. Rigidity magnifies stress, and flexibility turns stress into signal. So let's talk business. Think about Kodak. They invented the digital camera and then killed it because they were rigid. Their business model depended on film. So they ignored the future sitting right there on their desk. A rigid response, a fragile outcome. Blockbuster laughed at Netflix. They had the market, they had the stores, they had the brand, but they were rigid, tied to late fees, tied to physical inventory, tied to old assumptions. Now, Netflix is a verb. Blockbuster is just a memory. In recent years, companies that insisted that people must work only in the office, while others experimented with hybrid and flexibility, one group lost people. The other gained loyalty, creativity, and productivity. They gained the freedom of how. Rigidity kills relevance. When we overprotect what we build, we undercut our ability to evolve. And that's fragility. It just wears a suit. So now flip it. Think about Toyota during the Fukushima disaster. Their supply chains collapsed overnight. But instead of waiting for stability to return, they retooled factories, empowered local teams to find alternate suppliers, shared parts across divisions, and they flexed. They bounced back faster than almost any other competitor. They gave their team the freedom of how and beat everyone. Look at Apple. Love them or hate them, they're masters of behavioral flexibility at scale. They didn't even invent the smartphone, the tablet, or the watch. They saw the pattern, adapted faster, and executed relentlessly around value. They hedge through innovation, constant small adjustments towards where the world is moving. And it's not just for corporations. We can do it too as individuals. The people who navigated some of the world's biggest challenges recently, like the pandemic, weren't necessarily the smartest or the richest. They were the most flexible. They tried new ways of working, learning, connecting. They were willing to unlearn. Flexibility of behavior is the hallmark of leadership because behavior and leadership isn't about control, it's about influence. And influence only works if you meet people where they are. It's like language. It's far more effective to whisper in the language of your customer, your audience, or your team than it is to shout in your own. Rigid leaders shout in their own language. Flexible leaders whisper in yours. They don't lose their message, they just translate it. They know that leadership is about connection, not about compliance. So when a rigid leader has resistance, they push harder. When a flexible leader has resistance, they pivot, they ask, they're curious, and they listen. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Now, I can hear some of you already thinking, hey, Govind, doesn't flexibility mean being inconsistent? No, not at all. Flexibility isn't the opposite of conviction, it's the opposite of stubbornness. When your identity depends upon being right, you become rigid. When your identity depends upon learning, you stay flexible. And a rigid leader says, this is who I am. A flexible leader says, this is what I stand for, and I'll evolve how I express it. The difference is one protects your ego and the other protects purpose. So what's the hidden cost of rigidity? Rigid systems need constant protection. Rigid systems need constant reassurance. Rigid organizations need constant control. And all of that burns tons of energy. It eats attention. It limits creativity. You've felt it. You've been there. When you're rigid, every little change feels like a threat. But when you're flexible, change feels like data. The difference is emotional and profound. Rigidity says, I must control this. Flexibility says, with an open hand, I can handle this. And that shift from control to capacity is the hedge. It's how we survive long-term uncertainty without burning out. So, how do we actually build flexibility? You don't get flexible by adding more. You get flexible by letting go. Rigidity grows from clutter. Too many priorities, too many commitments, too many shoulds, woulds. Flexibility grows from clarity. Fewer things that matter. More space to move. Start by removing what doesn't. That's how athletes build range, by freeing the joints, not by adding weight. That's how organizations build agility, by simplifying processes, not multiplying them. So ask yourself, what meetings, rituals, or habits are keeping me rigid? What assumptions am I protecting that no longer serve me? And what expectations do I need to release to move faster, freer, and smarter? Because flexibility doesn't just happen, it's trained. So let's bring it all back to the napkin. One line labeled risk. And below the line, we have a rigid response and a fragile outcome. Above the line, we have a flexible response and a resilient outcome. In between you, your business, your family, and your leadership. That's the line in between. When you face uncertainty, remember, you can't control the risk and you can't predict the future. You can't insure against every loss, but you can build the hedge that outlasts every storm right now. Flexibility is present moment awareness. Flexibility is humility. Flexibility is curiosity in motion. When you stay flexible, you can shift energy instead of resisting it. You can listen instead of defend, complain, and blame. You can flow instead of fracture. And that's the edge of the napkin today. So here's a reflection that you may want to consider. Where in your life or business are you being rigid? Where could you be flexible instead? What are you holding on to that's keeping you fragile? And what would happen if you let it go? Not out of fear, but out of trust in your ability to adapt. Because that's what resilience really is. Not bouncing back to who you were, but bending toward who you can become and who you are really. So if this resonated with you, take a napkin and draw that line and ask yourself, where am I below the line, being too rigid? And where am I above it? Post it, share it, tag me, use the hashtag #PaperNapkinWisdom, and let's start a conversation about how we can all hedge better. Not with fear, but with flexibility. I'm Govind Jayaraman. Thanks for joining me on Edge of the Napkin. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And make it a great day.